Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nola Zimbongwa, and I'll be presenting a study about the traditional healers' insight for the development of biodiversity management plans for 6 threatened medicinal plant species in Mpumalanga. Despite access to Western medication, about 72% of South Africans still make use of traditional medicine. And this is partly because of the deeply rooted cultural beliefs in the workings of ancestors and the holistic healing of traditional medicine. However, there has been a rapid decline in medicinal plants, partly because of the unsustainable harvesting of medicinal plants, as this medicinal plant shown here has been ring-barked. Furthermore, there has been a huge impact by a lot of developments of medicinal plants because a lot of areas have been wiped out to make way for developments. This has now forced a lot of traditional healers and some multi-traders to make use of multi-markets to be able to source materials. Therefore, the aim of this study is to engage with traditional healers and multi-gatherers to develop a plan for how we can manage medicinal plants in Ehlanzeni district, to ensure that they are both available in the wild and that there is sufficient material for use by healers. The specific objectives are to investigate the demand and supply of the medicinal plants, what methods are used and/or are seen as important for plant conservation, and develop a long-term monitoring strategy and protocol in Ehlanzeni that clearly defines methods and periodicity. This study was a two-part study in which the first part of the study was done in 2016 and the second part was done in 2020. The initial selection of species was done in October 2016, whereby a priority scoring system was used to select threatened species. These were the categories that were used to select the species: conservation status, population trend, distribution pattern, popularity demand, presence in protected areas, ease of propagation, duration to harvesting, survival to harvesting. And according to priority scores in ascending order, these are the selected species: Siphonicales ethiopicus, Boyia volubis, Alipida cordifolia, Wabege solitaris, and Habotheopsis limifolia, and Dioscorea sylvatica. This study took place in the 4 local municipalities under Ehlanzeni: Bushbuck Ridge, Komazi, City of Mbombela, and Thabachweu, whereby we conducted semi-structured interviews comprising of 137 healers and 3 multi-gatherers. Concurrent to that, my other colleagues were conducting field surveys based on knowledge of locations of known populations. And those located populations were quantified and other information about habitat and landowner was noted. I will now take you through to the results and discussions. So in this first graph, what we wanted to understand is, we wanted to understand and know the time frame at which the respondents observed a decline in the targeted species. So a majority of respondents mentioned that they noticed a decline in the past 15 years for Dioscorea, and for Boyia volubis, Siphonicales ethiopicus, and Wabege solitaris, majority of the respondents said they noticed a decline in the past 10 years. And for Alipida cordifolia and Habotheopsis limifolia, the majority of the respondents said they noticed a decline in the past 5 years. It is important to note that Dioscorea sylvatica was also impacted by overseas pharmaceutical companies which came to South Africa and harvested this particular medicinal plant because of its medicinal properties. So this table here is showing us results of when we asked our respondents that since you're saying that you've noticed declines of this particular medicinal plant, which other areas within the district are you still able to harvest the 6 targeted species? Thabachweu local municipality was the one local municipality that was mentioned the most on average for all the 6 species. This means that this particular local municipality is a hotspot for these medicinal plants and therefore is in dire need for conservation and for interventions. However, it will be important and a benefit for us to use a bottom-up approach instead of a top-down approach to ensure a holistic understanding of conservation that will also be inclusive of the community's cultural belief systems. My colleagues visited a total of 381 sites to monitor populations of the targeted species. There are 3 known populations of Boyia volubis, but in 2020 only 2 were surveyed. The two populations occupied very different habitats and in 2020 were found to be strong populations with a very localized distribution. Allipedia carifolia was located at 4 sites, of which 3 populations are significant. 8 populations of Wabega salutaris were surveyed. 3 of these were large populations and their full extent was not established. 5 subpopulations of Haworthiopsis lemonifolia were surveyed, of which 3 can be considered as viable. 16 populations of Dioscorea sylvatica were surveyed. 5 large viable populations were identified during fieldwork and are considered worthy of conservation attention. 3 geographically distinct subpopulations of Siphonecales ethiopicus are known. During the 2020 field surveys, a large population of a few thousand plants was found. However, one of the other previously recorded subpopulations could not be found and is presumed extirpated. It is important to note that due to our community engagements, a third previously unrecorded population was found in the Bushbuck Ridge area. This is an illustration of the methods that are used by healers to obtain medicinal plants. So when we ask them, are they collecting and are they also traveling far when they are collecting? The majority of respondents in the 3 local municipalities, Bushbuck Ridge, Tabachew and Bombela, said yes, they're collecting and they are traveling very far. However, those at Nkomazi were of the contrary. And when we asked them, is it easy to collect? The majority of respondents in Nkomazi and Bombela said yes, it's easy to collect. However, those at Bushbuck Ridge and Tabachew felt that it is not easy to collect. And when we asked them, do they buy this particular medicinal plant? The majority of the respondents in all the 4 local municipalities said yes, they do buy medicinal plants. And when we asked them, is it easy to buy? The majority of respondents in all the 3 local municipalities, Tabachew, Bombela, and Nkomazi, said yes, it is easy to buy. However, those respondents from Bushbuck Ridge felt that it was not easy to buy. So in this following illustration is showing us the options that are available for THPs in Ehlanzeni to be able to buy medicinal plants. So pension days was the option that was used the most by our respondents. 35 in Bombela, 77 in Bushbuck Ridge, 7 in Tabachew, and 10 in Nkomazi. It is important to note that they mentioned that there are a lot of traders from Eswatini and Mozambique that come specifically on pension days to sell medicinal plants. This is just showing that there is an inter-border trade between South African traditional healers and gatherers and traditional healers of the neighboring countries. What we should also note here is that some of our respondents said they're making use of Faraday Market. Faraday Market is 300 to 400 kilometers away from Ehlanzeni district. This is just showing us that there is a dire need for medicinal plants in the communities of Ehlanzeni. However, some of the medicinal plants are already locally extinct in their villages. In this following figure, we wanted to understand the knowledge of our respondents in terms of permit regulations for collecting, selling, and using medicinal plants. So when we ask them that, do you need a permit to collect in your area? The majority of respondents in Bushbuck Ridge, Tabachew, and Nkomazi said no, they don't. Wherever those from Bombela, the majority said yes, they do. When we asked them, do you need a permit to collect outside of the area? The majority of respondents in Tabachew, Bombela, and Nkomazi said yes, you do need a permit for that. However, those at Bushbuck Ridge, the majority of them said no, you do not need a permit to collect outside of your area. And when we asked them, do you need a permit to buy medicinal plants? The majority of the respondents in all the 4 local municipalities thought that you do not need a permit to buy medicinal plants. And when we asked them, do you need a government permit to collect medicinal plants? The majority of respondents in Bushbuck Ridge, Tabachew, and Bombela said yes, you do need a government permit to collect. However, those in Nkomazi said, majority of them said no, you don't. When we asked them, do you need a government permit to sell and use medicinal plants? The majority of respondents in Nkomazi and Tabachew said no, you don't. However, the majority of respondents in Bushbuck Ridge and Bombela said they know that you do need a permit in order to sell and use. However, their understanding of a permit was very different to our understanding, as majority of them thought that if you have a letter from a traditional council or leader, then that means you have a permit to just harvest. And also some of them thought that the membership cards that they have from their respective organizations also serves as a permit. And when we held a workshop last year in November and we invited the different law enforcers from the provincial to the national government to explain permits to them, after that workshop, they actually pointed out that as much as they would like to apply for permits, number one, language is a barrier, and number two, they find that it's not practical for them to have permits for each different province, as the provinces have their own ordinances, on top of the fact that they're always traveling in between provinces. So they felt it was not practical. The following graph is showing us, we wanted to understand if our respondents are accepting using cultivated medicinal plants. And when we asked them if they used cultivated medicinal plants before, the majority of respondents in the 3 local municipalities said they have, and those at Mbombela were of the contrary. And when we asked them, is there a problem with cultivated medicinal plants in terms of spirituality and also in terms of potency? The majority of respondents in Bushbuckridge and Tabachwewu said yes, there is. However, the majority of respondents in Mbombela and Komazi said no, there isn't. And when we asked them, is cultivation a solution? The majority of respondents in all the 4 local municipalities said yes, it is a solution, but there were a lot of debates as to whether home gardens or nurseries will be a better solution. This table is showing us the ethnospecies that the traditional health practitioners are already cultivating. It is important to note that 4 out of the 6 medicinal species that were selected for the BMP are already being cultivated by our respondents. That is Alipida cardifolia, Wabega solitaris, Siphinicalis ethiopicus, and Haworthiopsis limifolia, with Wabega solitaris and Siphinicalis ethiopicus being the most cultivated. For sustainable economic development, monitoring the medicinal plant resource and its natural habitat is necessary to adjust management regime to ensure a sustainable supply of raw materials. Permit regulation system is not necessarily practical for traditional healers and gatherers. With that being said, there needs to be more awareness programs about permits. Cultivation is seen as the appropriate initiative to mitigate the decline of wild medicinal plants, but there's a difference in opinion as to whether home gardens or nurseries will be more practical. There are also socio-cultural differences, and also we need to take into consideration the differences in local traditions. Co-development of management plans that balance conservation with sustainable rural livelihoods and retain indigenous knowledge are necessary prerequisites for an effective BMP, especially for species that are beneficial to humanity. Siyathokoza, thank you.